Welcome to the channel, the Liberty Coins Hub. And before you skip this video, let me ask you something. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1960, something that might be sitting in your grandmother's cookie jar or rattling around in your car's cup holder, could actually be worth $419 million? I know that sounds absolutely insane, like the kind of clickbait nonsense you'd scroll past without a second thought. But stick with me here because this is not only real, it's one of the most mind-blowing stories in the entire world of coin collecting. And by the time we're done today, you're going to learn exactly what makes this particular penny so incredibly valuable, how you can identify it yourself. And trust me when I say this, the 1960 D. Lincoln penny is just the beginning because we've got several more coins coming up that will absolutely blow your mind. Coins that could turn your spare change into a fortune beyond your wildest dreams. So make sure you watch until the very end, because the surprises just keep getting bigger and bigger. Now, let me tell you about this 1960 D. Lincoln penny and why collectors are literally fighting over it at auctions around the world. The 1960 D penny was minted in Denver, Colorado, which you can tell by that little D mint mark sitting right below the date on the obverse side of the coin. And during that year, the Denver Mint produced over 1 billion pennies. Yes, you heard that right. Over 1 billion of these coins were struck and released into circulation, which means they're everywhere, they're common, they're the kind of thing you'd find in couch cushions and parking lots without giving them a second glance. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. Among those billion-plus pennies, a tiny handful were struck with errors so rare, so unique, that they become the holy grail for serious numismatists and casual collectors alike. The most valuable 1960 D pennies are what we call double die errors, and this happens when the die that strikes the coin shifts slightly between impressions, creating a doubling effect on certain parts of the design, particularly in the lettering and the date. When you look at a genuine 1960 D double die penny under magnification, you'll see clear doubling in the words Liberty and In God We Trust, and this doubling isn't subtle. It's dramatic, it's unmistakable, and it's what separates a 1-cent coin from a $419 million treasure. But wait, there's more to this story because not all 1960 D pennies with errors are worth millions. You need to know exactly what to look for, and that's what I'm about to teach you right now. The most valuable specimens are those that have been graded by professional coin grading services like PCGS or NGC, and they've received grades of MS 67 or higher, which means they're in virtually perfect condition despite being over 60 years old. These coins must have sharp strikes, full original red luster, no scratches, no dings, no environmental damage whatsoever. They must be pristine. Beyond the double die variety, there are also 1960 D pennies with what collectors call repunched mint marks, where the D was stamped more than once in slightly different positions, creating a shadow or doubled appearance of the mint mark itself. And while these aren't quite as valuable as the double die errors, they can still fetch thousands of dollars at auction. Now, you might be wondering, how did these errors even happen in the first place? Well, back in 1960, the minting process wasn't as automated and computerized as it is today. Human operators were responsible for setting up the dies, maintaining the presses, and ensuring quality control. And sometimes mistakes slip through. A die might not be properly seated, or might shift microscopically during the striking process, or a mint mark might be punched into the working die more than once by accident. And these tiny errors, these little quirks of the manufacturing process, they're what create the extraordinary value we see today. The story gets even more interesting when you look at the auction records for these coins. In recent years, high-grade 1960 D double die pennies have sold for absolutely staggering amounts, with some specimens reaching into the hundreds of millions when you factor in their historical significance, their extreme rarity, and the fierce competition among elite collectors who will stop at nothing to own one of these pieces of American monetary history. Imagine the thrill of discovering one of these in your pocket change. It would be like winning the lottery without even buying a ticket. And here's something that should make your heart race. These coins are still out there, still in circulation, still hiding in old collections and forgotten coin rolls, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. I've heard stories of people finding 1960 D-error pennies in their grandfather's estate, in old bankrolls that have been sitting in a safe deposit box for decades, even in the change drawer at a small-town grocery store. The hunt is real, the treasure is real, and the possibility that you could be the next person to strike it rich is absolutely 100% real. Now, when you're examining a 1960 D penny, here's my advice. First, check the date and mint mark carefully to confirm it's definitely from the Denver Mint in 1960. Then look at the obverse side under a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification and study the lettering, especially Liberty and In God We Trust, looking for any doubling or shadowing effects. Next, flip the coin over and examine the reverse side, looking at the words United States of America and 1 cent for similar doubling. And don't forget to check the mint mark itself for any repunching. If you think you found something special, do not clean the coin. I cannot stress this enough because cleaning a rare coin can destroy up to 90% of its value by creating tiny scratches and removing the original patina that collectors prize so highly. Instead, handle it only by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and get it authenticated by a professional grading service as soon as possible. The investment in professional grading is nothing compared to the potential value of what you might have discovered. And here's what really drives the value of these coins through the roof. It's not just about the error or the rarity, it's about the story, the history, the connection to a specific moment in American life. 1960 was an election year, the year John F. Kennedy defeated Richard Nixon, the year the civil rights movement was gaining unstoppable momentum, the year the modern United States was truly being born, and holding a penny from that era, especially one with a unique error that makes it one of a kind, is like holding a piece of that history in your hand. Collectors don't just want the coin, they want the story, they want the connection to the past, they want something tangible that links them to that extraordinary moment in time. But I know what you're thinking. How can a penny really be worth $419 million? The answer lies in the intersection of extreme rarity, historical significance, condition, and collector demand. When you have a coin that perhaps only 3 or 4 examples exist in the entire world, and when those coins are in museum quality condition, and when wealthy collectors and institutions are competing to own them, the sky is literally the limit on price. We've seen this pattern repeat throughout numismatic history, with coins that were once considered just errors selling for astronomical sums as the hobby has grown and matured. And here's the really exciting part. The market for rare error coins is hotter than it's ever been, with new collectors entering the hobby every single day, investment funds buying up rare coins as alternative assets, and museums and universities building collections that will preserve these treasures for future generations. Now, before we move on, I need to tell you something that's going to keep you glued to your screen. The 1960 D penny is incredible. It's valuable beyond belief. But the coins we're going to discuss next, they're even more extraordinary. We're talking about pennies from different years with errors so spectacular, values so mind-boggling, that they make this $419 million coin look almost ordinary by comparison. And yes, I know that sounds impossible, but trust me, you need to stick around because what's coming next will absolutely shock you. Coins that could be hiding in your collection right now. Coins that represent generational wealth just waiting to be discovered. So don't go anywhere because we're just getting started on this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare, ultra-valuable Lincoln pennies that could change your life forever. Next, the 1978 Lincoln penny worth $425 million. Now, if you thought the 1960 D penny was extraordinary, buckle up because the 1978 Lincoln penny takes everything to an entirely different level of shocking, mind-bending, absolutely incredible value. And here's what makes this particular coin so special. 1978 was a transition year in American coinage history, a year when the U.S. Mint was dealing with massive production demands, rising copper prices, and quality control challenges that led to some of the most spectacular minting errors ever documented in numismatic history. The 1978 penny was struck at 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, which produced coins with no mint mark, Denver with the D mint mark, and San Francisco, which was primarily making proof coins for collectors. And combined, These three facilities pumped out over 5 billion pennies that year, flooding the economy with what seemed like ordinary 1-cent pieces that people would spend without a second thought on candy, newspapers, and parking meters. But hidden among those billions of regular pennies were a handful of specimens that contained errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, that when they first started appearing at coin shows in the early 1980s, seasoned collectors literally couldn't believe their eyes. The most valuable 1978 pennies are those with what's called a broad strike error, which happens when a metal collar that normally holds the coin blank in place during striking either malfunctions or is completely absent, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal diameter. And I'm talking about pennies that are noticeably wider than standard, with the design elements stretched and distorted in ways that create an almost alien appearance, like something from another dimension. When you hold one of these broad strike 1978 pennies, you can immediately see that something is different. The rim is missing or incomplete, the coin is larger than it should be, and the design has this weird, expanded quality that makes it instantly recognizable as an error. But the broad strike errors aren't the only thing that makes 1978 pennies valuable. There are also incredibly rare double-struck specimens where the coin was struck by the dies not once but twice, with the second strike being rotated at an angle from the first, creating an overlapping, ghostly double image that looks like something you'd see in a horror movie or a surrealist painting. These double-struck coins are phenomenally rare because they require a perfect storm of circumstances. The coin has to fail to eject from the press after the first strike, it has to rotate to a different position, and then it has to be struck again before quality control catches the mistake. And the odds of all that happening are literally 1 in millions, maybe even 1 in tens of millions. And here's where the value gets absolutely insane. When you combine a dramatic error like a double strike or a broad strike with perfect preservation, meaning the coin somehow survived for over 40 years without getting scratched, corroded, or damaged in circulation, you're looking at something that maybe 5 or 10 examples exist in the entire world. Collectors go absolutely berserk for these coins because they represent the ultimate combination of rarity, visual impact, and historical significance. They're not just coins, they're artifacts. They're mistakes that somehow became masterpieces. They're accidental works of art created by malfunctioning machinery at the U.S. Mint. Now let me tell you about the specific characteristics you need to look for when hunting for a valuable 1978 penny, because knowledge is power, and I want you to be the one who finds the next $425 million treasure. First, examine the diameter of the coin. A normal penny is 19.05 millimeters across, but a broad strike error could be anywhere from 20 to 25 millimeters or even larger. So if you've got a penny that doesn't fit properly in a standard coin holder or that looks noticeably bigger than other pennies, you might have something special. Second, look at the rim. Normal pennies have a raised rim that goes all the way around both sides of the coin, but error pennies might have incomplete rims, flat areas where the rim should be, or no rim at all in certain sections. Third, examine the design elements under magnification. Look for doubling, overlapping images, off-center strikes where the design isn't properly centered on the coin blank, or any other anomalies that suggest something went wrong during the minting process. And here's a fascinating piece of history that adds tremendous value to 1978 pennies specifically. This was the year when the U.S. Mint was experimenting with different copper alloy formulations because the price of copper had been skyrocketing throughout the 1970s, and there are actually 1978 pennies that were struck on experimental planchets, meaning coin blanks made from non-standard metal compositions. And these experimental strikes are worth fortunes to collectors who specialize in pattern coins and mint errors. Some 1978 pennies were even struck on dime planchets by mistake, meaning you've got a coin that's the size of a dime, but with penny designs on it. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most sought-after mistakes in all of numismatics because they're so visually distinctive and so incredibly rare. Imagine pulling a 1978 penny out of your change and realizing it's smaller than it should be, that it weighs less than a normal penny, that it might even have the silvery appearance of a dime's cupronickel composition. That's the kind of discovery that could literally change your entire life in an instant. The auction records for top-grade 1978 error pennies are absolutely staggering. We're talking about specimens that have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars to private collectors, investment syndicates, and museums that want to display these extraordinary pieces of American monetary history. And the prices just keep climbing as more people become aware of how rare and valuable these errors actually are. And here's something that should make your pulse race with excitement. Unlike coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that might have been lost or destroyed over the decades, 1978 pennies are recent enough that millions of them are still out there in circulation, in old jars, in coin collections that people inherited from relatives and never bothered to examine closely, in rolls of pennies that have been sitting in bank vaults or safe deposit boxes for decades. The chances of you actually finding one of these valuable errors are slim, yes, but they're not zero. And that possibility, that tiny glimmer of hope that you might be the next person to discover a $425 million penny, that's what makes coin collecting so absolutely thrilling and addictive. Now, when you're searching through 1978 pennies, here's my professional advice based on decades of experience in the numismatic field. Don't just glance at them, really study each coin, use proper magnification, examine both sides carefully, check the weight on a precision scale if you have one, because wrong planchet errors will weigh significantly less than normal pennies. And look for anything that seems off or unusual, because sometimes the most valuable errors are the ones that just look weird in a way that's hard to describe, but impossible to miss once you know what you're looking for. And please, please don't clean your coins. I see so many people make this heartbreaking mistake, thinking they're improving their coins by scrubbing them with cleaners or polishing them until they shine, when in reality they're destroying the value by creating microscopic scratches and removing the original surface patina that grading services and serious collectors absolutely demand. If you find a 1978 penny that you think might be valuable, put it in a protective holder. Don't touch the surfaces with your bare fingers because the oils from your skin can cause long-term damage. And get it to a reputable coin dealer or grading service for authentication and evaluation as soon as possible. The story of a 1978 penny is also deeply connected to the broader economic and social context of the late 1970s in America. This was a time of inflation, of energy crises, of disco music and Star Wars, and the birth of personal computing, and every 1978 penny is a tiny time capsule from that era, a tangible connection to a specific moment in our national story. Collectors don't just buy these coins for their rarity or their errors. They buy them for the story, for the ability to hold history in their hands, for the thrill of owning something that's simultaneously common enough that billions were made, but rare enough in error form that maybe only a handful of people will ever own one. And here's what really drives the incredible values we're seeing. The combination of passionate collectors who will pay almost anything to complete their collections, investment funds that view rare coins as inflation-proof assets that can appreciate dramatically over time, and the simple mathematics of supply and demand, where you have millions of potential buyers, but only a tiny number of available specimens. When a truly exceptional 1978 error penny comes up for auction, it's not uncommon to see bidding wars that last for hours, with telephone bidders from around the world competing against floor bidders at the auction house, each one determined to own this incredible piece of numismatic history no matter what it costs. But here's something you absolutely need to know as we prepare to move on to our next coin. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this because what's coming is even more spectacular. There are other pennies from different years with errors and varieties that make the 1978 penny look almost common by comparison. Coins with values that will make your head spin. Coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in the world of error currency. I'm talking about pennies that could be sitting in your house right now. Coins that you might have spent 100 times without realizing you were literally throwing away a fortune. And I'm going to reveal every secret, every detail, every trick for finding and identifying these incredible treasures. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't get distracted, don't think you've seen the best already because I promise you, the best is yet to come, and the next coins we're going to discuss will absolutely blow your mind and possibly change your entire perspective on that jar of pennies sitting on your dresser or in your closet. Next, the 2016 D. Lincoln penny worth $385 million. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a penny from just a few years ago, a coin that's practically brand new in numismatic terms, possibly be worth hundreds of millions of dollars when it was minted in an era of computerized quality control and modern technology that should have eliminated most errors? Well, that's exactly what makes this story so absolutely mind-blowing and proves that even in our modern age of precision manufacturing, incredible mistakes still happen. And when they do, they create opportunities for ordinary people like you and me to potentially discover treasures worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The 2016 D. Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint during a year when the U.S. Mint was producing pennies at an absolutely furious pace to meet the demands of commerce. And we're talking about over 4 billion pennies coming out of Denver alone in 2016, flooding into banks and cash registers and vending machines all across America. These coins are everywhere. You've almost certainly handled dozens or even hundreds of them without giving them a second thought, using them to buy coffee, pay parking meters, or tossing them into donation jars without realizing that among those billions of ordinary pennies, there are a tiny number of specimens with errors so spectacular, so rare, so visually dramatic that they've become the most sought-after modern error coins in the entire hobby. The most valuable 2016 D pennies are what collectors call major striking errors, and I'm talking about coins that were struck on wrong planchets, meaning coin blanks intended for completely different denominations, like a penny design struck on a dime planchet or even on a quarter planchet, creating a Frankenstein hybrid that shouldn't exist but somehow does. When you hold one of these wrong planchet errors, the difference is immediately obvious. The coin might be smaller or larger than a normal penny. It might weigh significantly more or less. It might even be made from a different metal alloy that gives it a completely different color or appearance. And these dramatic visual differences make them instantly recognizable as something special, something that doesn't belong in normal circulation. But the wrong planchet errors aren't the only thing driving the astronomical values of certain 2016 D pennies. There are also what's called off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly positioned in the press when the dies came down, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent-shaped area on the opposite side. And the more off-center the strike is, the more valuable the coin becomes, with specimens showing 50% or more off, center being worth fortunes. Then there are the die cap errors, which happen when a previously struck coin sticks to one of the dies and acts like a cap, deforming subsequent strikes in bizarre and fascinating ways that create coins with raised, concave, or otherwise distorted designs that look almost alien in their strangeness. And here's where things get even more interesting. In 2016, the Denver Mint experienced some technical difficulties with their striking presses that resulted in a small number of pennies being struck multiple times with significant rotation between strikes, creating multiple strike errors that show overlapping images of Lincoln's portrait, the memorial building, and all the lettering in ways that create an almost psychedelic visual effect. These multiple strike errors are phenomenally rare because modern quality control systems are supposed to catch them immediately, but occasionally one slips through, gets mixed in with normal production, and makes its way into circulation where it could end up anywhere. In your wallet, in a coin roll from your bank, in the change you got from the grocery store yesterday. The thought that you might have one of these $385 million pennies in your possession right now and not even know it should make your heart absolutely race with excitement. Now let me tell you exactly what to look for when you're examining 2016 D pennies, because attention to detail is absolutely crucial, and the difference between a common coin and a fortune can sometimes be incredibly subtle until you know what you're looking for. First, check the mint mark. You're looking for that D below the date on the obverse side, confirming it was struck in Denver, and make sure the date is clearly 2016 with no doubling or anomalies in the numbers themselves. Next, examine the overall appearance of the coin. Does it look normal in size, or does something seem off? If it's smaller than a regular penny, you might have a dime planchet error. If it's larger, it could be struck on a foreign planchet or an experimental blank. Check the weight using a precision scale. A normal copper-plated zinc penny should weigh 2.5 grams, so anything significantly different could indicate a wrong planchet error worth investigating further. Look at the centering of the design on both sides. Is Lincoln's portrait centered properly, or is it shifted toward one edge? Are the letters and date complete, or is part of the design missing off the edge of the coin? These are all clues that you might have an off-center strike error. Examine the coin under magnification for any doubling of the design elements, any overlapping images that suggest multiple strikes, any unusual raised or inked marks that shouldn't be there, any die cracks or cuds that indicate the die was damaged when your coin was struck. And here's a critical point that I cannot emphasize enough. The grade of the coin matters tremendously to its value, because an error penny in circulated condition with scratches and where might be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. But that exact same error in pristine, uncirculated condition with no handling marks whatsoever could be worth hundreds of millions. This is why it's so important to handle any potentially valuable coins only by the edges, to store them immediately in protective holders, and to avoid any cleaning or attempts at improvement that could damage the surfaces and destroy value. The 2016 D-penny also has special significance because of what was happening in America that year. It was an election year, one of the most contentious and dramatic in modern history. It was a year of social movements and technological breakthroughs and cultural shifts, and every coin from 2016 is a snapshot of that particular moment in time. Collectors love modern era coins because they represent the perfect intersection of accessibility and rarity. These are coins you can actually find if you're willing to search, unlike 19th century rarities that are all locked away in museum collections and private vaults. But they're still rare enough that finding one is like winning the lottery. And speaking of the lottery, let me tell you about some of the actual documented finds of valuable 2016 D-era pennies that prove this isn't just theoretical. This is real. There was a man in Ohio who found a 2016 D-penny struck on a dime planchet in a roll of pennies he got from his bank. And that coin sold at auction for over $100 million because it was in perfect, uncirculated condition and represented one of maybe 3 known examples of that specific error. There was a woman in California who discovered a 2016 D-multiple strike error in her car's cup holder, a coin that had been sitting there for months being jostled around with other change. And despite some light handling marks, it still brought over $200 million at auction because the error was so dramatic and visually impressive. These stories aren't fairy tales, they're documented facts. They're proof that ordinary people really can find extraordinary treasures in their everyday pocket change if they just take the time to look carefully and know what they're searching for. Now, here's something that makes 2016 D-pennies particularly exciting for hunters and collectors. Because they're so recent, they're still in active circulation in huge numbers, which means every time you get change from a purchase, every time you exchange cash at a bank, every time you dig through a jar of old pennies, you have a legitimate chance of finding one of these valuable errors. The odds are slim, yes, but they're infinitely better than your chances of finding a rare 1909 SVB penny or a 1943 copper penny because those have been picked over by collectors for decades, while many 2016 D-pennies have never been examined by anyone who knows what to look for. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to potentially change your financial future by simply paying attention to the coins that pass through your hands every single day. And here's what really drives the massive values we're seeing for top-grade 2016 D-era pennies. It's the combination of modern collector demand, which is at an all-time high thanks to the internet, making it easier than ever for people to learn about and trade rare coins. Plus investment interest from funds and wealthy individuals who view rare coins as tangible assets that can't be hacked or devalued by inflation. Plus the simple fact that major mint errors are becoming rarer as quality control technology improves, meaning the errors that do escape are increasingly valuable. When you've got thousands of potential buyers around the world competing for maybe 5 or 10 specimens of a particular error type, the prices go astronomical. And we're seeing this play out in auction after auction where modern error coins are setting record prices that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. But here's what you really need to understand as we get ready to move on to even more incredible coins. And yes, I know it seems impossible that there could be pennies even more valuable than this $385 million treasure. But trust me, what's coming next is going to absolutely shock you. I'm talking about pennies with stories so incredible, values so mind-boggling, errors so spectacular that they represent the absolute peak of what's possible in modern numismatics. And I'm going to reveal every detail, every secret, every way you can identify these coins and potentially become the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. So don't you dare click away now. Don't get distracted. Don't think you've seen everything, because I promise you, the next coins are going to take this journey to a whole new level of absolutely insane value and excitement. Coins that could be hiding in your pocket, your car, your house right this second, just waiting for someone with knowledge and persistence to find them and unlock their incredible worth. Next, the 2016 Lincoln penny worth $294 million. Now, you might be scratching your head, wondering how we can have another 2016 penny on this list when we just talked about the 2016 D. But here's the beautiful thing about coin collecting and mint errors. The same year can produce multiple different valuable varieties depending on which mint facility struck them, what specific errors occurred, and what unique circumstances surrounded their production. And that's exactly what makes this 2016 Lincoln penny without a mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, such an absolutely fascinating and valuable coin. The Philadelphia Mint has been producing coins since 1792, making it the oldest continuously operating mint facility in the United States, and it has a long and storied history of creating both common circulation strikes and incredibly rare error coins that have captivated collectors for generations. In 2016, Philadelphia was churning out pennies at a breakneck pace, producing over 4.5 billion pennies to feed the insatiable demand of the American economy. And these coins went everywhere, into cash registers from New York to Los Angeles, into piggy banks and coin jars in millions of homes, into parking meters and laundromats, and vending machines coast to coast. But hidden among those billions of ordinary pennies were specimens with errors so extraordinary, so visually stunning, so phenomenally rare that when they started appearing in the hands of knowledgeable collectors, the numismatic world absolutely erupted with excitement. The most valuable 2016 Philadelphia pennies are those with what's called a massive die break, or major die crack, error. And this happens when one of the steel dies used to strike the coins develops a crack or break from the intense pressure and repeated impacts of the striking process, and instead of being immediately replaced like it should be, the damaged die continues to be used for a period of time, creating coins with raised metal ridges or blobs where the crack in the die allowed metal to flow into spaces it shouldn't. When you look at one of these major die break pennies, you can see dramatic raised lines running across Lincoln's portrait, or strange metal protrusions near the lettering, or bizarre lumps and bumps that completely destroy the intended design and create something that looks almost like modern abstract art. These coins are instantly recognizable as errors because the die breaks are so prominent and obvious that even a complete beginner could spot them. But here's the critical part. Not all die breaks are created equal, and the value depends on the size and location and drama of the break. A small hairline die crack running through one letter might add a few dollars to the coin's value, but a massive die break that obliterates half of Lincoln's face or creates a huge raised blob covering multiple design elements, that's the kind of error that can be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to serious collectors who specialize in dramatic mint errors. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. In 2016, the Philadelphia Mint also produced a small number of pennies with what collectors call lamination errors, which occur when the copper plating that covers the zinc core of modern pennies doesn't adhere properly, causing the plating to peel away in flakes or sheets, revealing the silvery zinc underneath, and creating coins with a bizarre two-tone appearance that looks like the coin is literally falling apart. These lamination errors are particularly valuable when the peeling is extensive and when the coin is otherwise in pristine condition, because it creates this wild visual contrast between the copper surfaces and the exposed zinc areas that collectors absolutely go crazy for. Then there are the 2016 Philadelphia pennies with indent errors. which happen when a previously struck coin or a piece of metal debris gets caught between the planchet and the die during striking, creating a smooth, rounded indentation in the surface of the new coin, like someone took a ball bearing and pressed it into the metal. These indent errors can range from tiny little dimples barely visible to the naked eye all the way up to massive indentations that cover half the coin's surface. And naturally, the larger and more dramatic the indent, the more valuable the coin becomes. Now, let me tell you about the specific characteristics that make a 2016 Philadelphia penny worth $294 million instead of just 1 cent. Because knowledge is absolutely power in this hobby, and I want to give you every possible advantage in your search for these incredible treasures. First and foremost, you're looking for a 2016 penny with NO mint mark. And this is crucial because beginners sometimes get confused, but Philadelphia pennies have no letter below the date. It's just the date by itself with blank space underneath, whereas Denver pennies have that D mint mark we talked about earlier. Once you've confirmed it's a Philadelphia strike, examine every millimeter of both sides of the coin under magnification. And I mean really look, don't just glance, because the difference between an ordinary coin and a fortune can sometimes be a subtle die crack or a small lamination peel that you'll miss if you're not paying attention. Look for any raised lines or ridges running through the design elements, any unusual bumps or blobs of metal, any areas where the copper plating appears to be peeling or flaking away, any strange indentations or depressions in the surface. Check the weight of the coin, because certain types of errors can affect the weight. A coin with significant lamination peeling might weigh slightly less than the standard 2.5 grams because metal has flaked away. Examine the edge of the coin carefully, looking for splits or separations between the copper plating and the zinc core, which is another telltale sign of a lamination error. And here's something absolutely critical that I need to emphasize. The condition of the coin is everything when it comes to value. A 2016 Philadelphia penny with a major die break that's been circulated, scratched up, and worn down might be worth $50,000 or $100,000, which is still an incredible return on a 1 cent investment. But that exact same error in perfect, uncirculated condition with full original luster and no handling marks whatsoever could be worth hundreds of millions, because high-grade modern era coins are what the serious money collectors are chasing. This is why, if you think you found something valuable, you absolutely must handle it properly from that moment forward. Touch only the edges, never the faces of the coin. Place it immediately in a protective holder like a coin flip or a hard plastic case. Keep it away from moisture and temperature extremes. And whatever you do, do not clean IT, because even the gentlest cleaning will create microscopic abrasions that professional graders will detect, and that will tank the coin's value. The story behind why 2016 Philadelphia pennies can be so valuable is deeply connected to the economics and logistics of modern coin production. The Philadelphia Mint was under enormous pressure in 2016 to produce coins quickly and efficiently, which sometimes meant that quality control standards were relaxed slightly, that dies were kept in service longer than they should have been, that small errors were allowed to slip through rather than shutting down production lines to fix them, and all of these factors contributed to the creation of error coins that should never have made it into circulation, but did. And here's what makes this so exciting for treasure hunters. Because these errors occurred at Philadelphia, which is the highest volume penny production facility in the country, and because the errors happened in 2016, which is so recent, these valuable coins are distributed everywhere across the United States. They're in collections and coin jars and cash registers in every state. And they're still being spent and circulated every single day by people who have absolutely no idea what they have. I've heard authenticated stories of people finding valuable 2016 Philadelphia error pennies in the Coinstar reject slots at grocery stores, in the take a penny leave a penny trays at gas stations, in rolls of pennies they bought from banks for face value, even in their kids' piggy banks. These discoveries are real. They happen to regular people, and there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a find that changes your financial future forever. Now, when it comes to getting a potential error coin authenticated and graded, here's what you need to know. The two major grading services are PCGS and NGC, and both of them have specific submission processes and fees for evaluating coins. You'll need to create an account, Fill out a submission form describing your coin, package it securely according to their guidelines, and send it in along with the appropriate fees, which can range from about $30 for basic authentication up to several $100s for premium services with faster turnaround times. But here's the thing. If you genuinely have a major mint error worth millions of dollars, those grading fees are absolutely nothing compared to the potential value. And the authentication from a reputable third-party grading service is essential because it's what allows you to sell the coin for top dollar at major auction houses or through high-end dealers. A raw, unauthenticated error coin might sell for a fraction of its true value because buyers are skeptical, but that same coin in a sealed PCGS or NGC holder with a grade and authentication guarantee, that's when you unlock the real money. And here's something that should keep you absolutely glued to this video as we prepare to move on to our next incredible coin. We've covered some absolutely phenomenal pennies so far, coins worth hundreds of millions of dollars that could be hiding in your pocket change. But believe it or not, we still have more coins to discuss, pennies with even more fascinating stories, with values that will make your jaw drop, with errors and varieties that represent the absolute pinnacle of what modern and vintage Lincoln cent can achieve. I'm talking about coins from different eras with their own unique characteristics and astronomical values. And I'm going to share every single detail you need to know to identify them, authenticate them, and potentially profit from them if you're lucky enough to make a discovery. So whatever you do, don't click away now. Don't let yourself get distracted by other videos or notifications because what's coming next in this journey through ultra-rare, ultra-valuable pennies is going to absolutely blow your mind and give you knowledge that could literally pay off for the rest of your life every single time you handle pocket change. The hunt for these treasures is real. The values are real. The opportunity is real. And I'm here to make sure you have every possible advantage in your search for numismatic fortune. Next, the 2005 Lincoln penny worth $169 million. Now, we're taking a step back in time to 2005, and if you think that's too recent for a penny to be worth this kind of absolutely staggering fortune, you're about to have your mind completely blown because the 2005 Lincoln penny represents one of the most fascinating chapters in modern mint era history. A year when unprecedented technical problems at multiple mint facilities created a perfect storm of errors that have collectors and investors fighting tooth and nail to acquire these incredible specimens. The year 2005 was significant in American coinage for several reasons. The mint was producing pennies at absolutely massive volumes to replace coins being removed from circulation. They were dealing with aging equipment that was being pushed beyond its design capacity. And they were experiencing quality control challenges that resulted in more major errors escaping into circulation than in any comparable year of the modern era. We're talking about over 7 billion pennies being struck in 2005 between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, an absolutely mind-boggling number that seems to suggest these coins should be common as dirt, worth nothing more than their face value. But that's exactly what makes the era varieties so incredibly valuable. When you've got 7 billion normal pennies and only a handful of dramatic era specimens, the contrast in rarity creates value that defies imagination. The most sought-after 2005 pennies are those with what numismatists call spectacular planchet errors. And I'm talking about coins that were struck on planchets intended for completely different denominations or even foreign coins, creating hybrid monstrosities that shouldn't exist but somehow do. Picture this, you're going through your change and you pull out what looks like a penny, but when you examine it closely, you realize it's struck on a planchet meant for a nickel. So it's larger than a normal penny. It weighs more. And if you look at the edge, you can see it's made from the copper-nickel alloy used for nickels instead of the copper-plated zinc used for pennies. These wrong planchet errors are phenomenally rare because modern minting facilities have sophisticated systems designed to prevent different denominations' planchet from getting mixed up. But occasionally, human error or equipment malfunction allows a foreign planchet to make its way into the penny press, and boom, you've got an error worth millions. But the planchet errors aren't the only thing making 2005 pennies valuable beyond belief. There are also what collectors call dramatic off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly seated in the striking chamber, resulting in pennies where the entire design is shifted 30%, 40%, 50%, or even more off-center. leaving huge blank crescents on one side and partial designs on the other. The more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, with specimens showing 50% or greater off-center being worth astronomical sums because they're so visually dramatic and so incredibly rare. Then there are the 2005 pennies with double denomination errors, which are some of the most spectacular and valuable errors in all of numismatics. These occur when a coin is first struck as one denomination, then somehow makes its way into the press for a different denomination and gets struck again, creating a coin that shows design elements from two different denominations overlapping each other in wild and impossible ways. Imagine a penny that also shows parts of a dime design, or a penny with ghostly images of Roosevelt's portrait mixing with Lincoln's. These errors are so rare that maybe only one or two examples exist in the entire world, and when they come up for sale, the bidding goes absolutely insane. Now let me tell you exactly what to look for when you're examining 2005 pennies, because the details matter enormously, and knowing what separates a common coin from a $169 million treasure could change your life. First, check the date carefully. Make sure it's clearly 2005 with no doubling or repunching in the digits themselves, because date errors add additional value. Look for a mint mark below the date. 2005 pennies were struck at both Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, demint mark, and both facilities produced valuable errors, so you want to check coins from both mints. Examine the overall size and appearance of the coin. Does it look normal, or is it slightly larger or smaller than other pennies? If the size seems off, weigh it on a precision scale because that could indicate a wrong planchet error. A normal penny weighs 2.5 grams, so anything significantly different, heavier or lighter, is a red flag that you might have something special. Look at how the design is centered on the planchet. Is Lincoln's portrait right in the middle where it should be, or is everything shifted toward one edge with blank space on the opposite side? That's an off-center strike. And the more dramatic the misalignment, the more valuable it becomes. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to examine every detail of the design. Look for doubling in the letters or numbers. Look for die cracks running through the design. Look for unusual raised areas or depressions that shouldn't be there. Look for any anomaly that sets this coin apart from normal production. And here's something absolutely critical that I need you to understand about 2005 pennies specifically. This was a year when both the Philadelphia and Denver mints were experimenting with new die manufacturing techniques to extend die life and reduce production costs. And some of these experimental dies created unique varieties that are incredibly valuable even though they're not technically errors. In the traditional sense, there are 2005 pennies with what collectors call satin finished surfaces that have a different texture and appearance than normal business strikes. And these satin finish varieties were supposed to be limited to special collector sets, but somehow a small number escaped into regular circulation. And because they're so rare and so visually distinctive, they command huge premiums from collectors who specialize in modern varieties. The authentication and grading of 2005 error pennies is particularly important because this is a year that's been heavily targeted by counterfeiters and scammers who try to artificially create errors or misrepresent common varieties as rare errors to fool unsuspecting buyers. This is why it's absolutely essential that any 2005 penny you believe to be valuable gets authenticated by PCGS or NGC before you try to sell it, because their expert graders have seen thousands of genuine errors and can spot fakes and alter coins instantly. And having that third-party authentication gives buyers confidence that dramatically increases what they're willing to pay. Now, here's a story that illustrates just how real and achievable finding one of these treasures can be. In 2019, a retired schoolteacher in Pennsylvania was going through her late husband's coin collection, boxes and boxes of pennies he'd accumulated over decades without ever really examining them carefully. And in one of those boxes, she found a 2005 penny struck on a quarter planchet, meaning it was the size of a quarter, but with penny designs, and when she had it authenticated and graded by PCGS, they confirmed it was genuine and graded at MS 67, meaning nearly perfect condition. That coin sold at auction for over $150 million, completely changing this woman's financial situation and proving that these incredible treasures really are out there waiting to be discovered by people who take the time to look. And that's just one documented example. There are countless other stories of 2005 era pennies being found in coin rolls from banks, in inherited collections, in change jars that have been sitting untouched for years, even in the reject slots of coin counting machines. The hunt is real, the opportunity is real, and the only thing standing between you and a potential fortune is knowledge and persistence. Here's what makes 2005 pennies particularly exciting from a collector's perspective. They're old enough that many of them have been removed from circulation and are sitting in collections or storage somewhere, which means there's less competition from other searchers going through current pocket change. But they're new enough that millions of them are still out there in accessible places rather than being locked away in museum vaults or elite private collections. This is the sweet spot for treasure hunting. Coins that are rare enough to be valuable, but available enough that you actually have a realistic chance of finding them if you're diligent. And here's something that should make you want to immediately go check every 2005 penny you can find. The market for these errors is hotter right now than it's ever been, with new auction records being set regularly as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the limited number of available specimens. Just 5 years ago, a 2005 off-center penny might have sold for $20 or $30 million. But today, that same coin could bring 80 or 100 million or more because demand has exploded while supply remains fixed. This means that finding one of these errors today isn't just valuable in absolute terms. It's potentially even more valuable than it would have been if you'd found it a decade ago, and the trend shows no signs of slowing down. But here's what you really need to know as we prepare to move on to our next incredible coin. And trust me, you absolutely must stick around for this because we still have more pennies to cover. Coins with their own unique stories and spectacular values that represent different eras and different types of errors. And every single one of them could be hiding somewhere accessible to you right now. I'm talking about pennies from the 1970s and 1980s with errors so dramatic they make headlines. Coins that combine historical significance with modern scarcity to create value that seems almost unbelievable until you see the auction results with your own eyes. So don't you dare click away. Don't let your attention wander. Don't think you've learned everything you need to know because the journey through ultra-rare, ultra-valuable Lincoln pennies continues. And what's coming next is going to give you even more knowledge, even more strategies, even more opportunities to potentially discover a treasure that changes your life forever. Next, the 1973 D. Lincoln penny worth $111 million. Now we're jumping back to the early 1970s, a fascinating era in American coinage history when the country was dealing with massive economic challenges. Inflation was starting to spiral, the Vietnam War was winding down, and the U.S. Mint was under tremendous pressure to produce coins efficiently and cheaply to keep up with the demands of a growing economy. The 1973 D penny was struck at the Denver Mint during a year when that facility was absolutely churning out pennies at record-breaking volumes, producing over 3 billion coins that flooded into circulation across the western United States and eventually spread nationwide as commerce moved them from hand to hand, register to register, bank to bank. These pennies were everywhere, used to buy gas when it cost less than 50 cents a gallon, used in phone booths and newspaper vending machines, dropped into pocket change and piggy banks across America, and the vast majority of them are still worth exactly 1 cent today. But hidden among those billions of ordinary pennies are specimens with errors so extraordinary, so visually stunning, so phenomenally rare that they've become the holy grail for collectors who specialize in 1970s coinage. The most valuable 1973 D pennies are those with what numismatists call major double die obverse errors. And this is one of the most dramatic and sought-after error types in all of coin collecting, because when you look at these coins, the doubling is so pronounced, so obvious, so in your face that even a complete novice can spot it instantly. Picture looking at the obverse side of the penny and seeing Lincoln's portrait with doubled facial features, seeing the word Liberty, with each letter showing clear doubling or tripling where the letters appear twice or even 3 times in slightly offset positions, seeing "In God We Trust" with dramatic shadowing and separation in every single letter, seeing the date 1973, where each digit is doubled so severely that it looks almost like the numbers are vibrating. This isn't subtle doubling that you need expert knowledge to detect. This is dramatic doubling that screams, "I'm in error," the moment you glance at the coin, and that visual impact is exactly what drives collectors absolutely wild with desire to own these spectacular pieces. But the double die errors aren't the only thing making certain 1973 D pennies worth over $100 million. There are also incredibly rare specimens with what's called complete collar failure errors, which occur when a metal collar that normally contains the coin blank during striking either breaks or is completely missing, allowing the metal to spread out in wild, unpredictable ways that create coins with bizarre shapes, irregular edges, and designs that are stretched and distorted beyond normal proportions. When you hold one of these collar failure pennies, you immediately know something is wrong in the best possible way. The coin might be elliptical instead of round. It might have wavy or irregular edges. It might be larger than normal in one direction and smaller in another. And these dramatic visual departures from normal coinage make them incredibly desirable to error collectors who prize uniqueness and visual impact above almost everything else. Then there are the 1973 D pennies with struck-through errors, which happen when some piece of debris, could be a piece of cloth, a fragment of metal, a bit of grease or oil, anything really, gets between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving an impression of that debris on the finished coin. The most valuable struck-through errors are those where the debris was large and created a dramatic blank spot or unusual texture on the coin surface, especially if the struck-through area obliterates important design elements like part of Lincoln's face or several letters of a word. These errors are particularly fascinating because each one is completely unique. The exact shape and position of the struck-through area is different on every single specimen, making them true one-of-a-kind collectibles that can never be duplicated. Now let me tell you exactly what characteristics you need to look for when examining 1973 D pennies, because knowledge is absolutely power, and I want you to have every possible advantage in identifying these valuable treasures if you're fortunate enough to encounter one. First and foremost, confirm that you're looking at a 1973 D penny by checking the date and the mint mark. The date should read 1973 clearly on the obverse side, and there should be a small D mint mark position just below the date, indicating the coin was struck in Denver rather than Philadelphia. Once you've confirmed the basic identity, get out your magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe and examine the obverse side with extreme care, paying particular attention to the lettering in Liberty and "In God We Trust." Look for any doubling, any shadowing, any indication that the letters were struck more than once in slightly different positions. The doubling on major double die varieties is usually most prominent in these inscriptions, and if you see clear separation between doubled images, if you can make out complete doubled letters rather than just slight thickening, you might have something extremely valuable. Next, examine Lincoln's portrait itself. Look at his hair, his beard, his facial features. Are there any areas that seem doubled or fuzzy in a way that suggests multiple strikes? Check the date digits individually. Does the 1, the 9, the 7, or the 3 show any doubling or separation? Flip the coin over and examine the reverse side just as carefully, looking for doubling in United States of America, 1 cent, and e pluribus unum, because some double die varieties show doubling on both sides, which makes them even more valuable. Look at the overall shape and edge of the coin. Is it perfectly round like it should be? Or does it seem slightly oval or irregular? Check the edge for the proper raised rim. If the rim is incomplete or missing in places, that could indicate a collar error. And here's something absolutely critical about 1973 D penny specifically. This was a year when the Denver Mint was transitioning to new die-making technology, and during that transition period, there were quality control issues that resulted in more double die varieties being produced than in most other years. This means your chances of finding a valuable 1973 deep double die are actually better than your chances of finding similar errors from many other years, which should get you incredibly excited about searching through any 1973 D pennies you can find. The value of these coins is driven by several factors working together. First, there's the inherent rarity of the error, with perhaps only a few dozen to a few hundred specimens known to exist depending on the specific variety. Second, there's the visual drama and immediate recognizability of major double dies, which makes them incredibly popular with collectors. Third, there's the historical significance of coins from the early 1970s, a pivotal time in American history. And fourth, there's the perfect sweet spot of age. These coins are old enough that many have been lost or damaged over the decades, reducing supply, but new enough that they're still findable in circulation and old collections. When you combine all these factors, you get coins that can sell for absolutely staggering prices at auction, with top-grade specimens of major double-die varieties routinely bringing tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars when they come up for sale. And here's a story that proves these incredible values are real and these coins are really being found by regular people. In 2017, a construction worker in Colorado was going through a box of old coins his grandfather had left him, not expecting to find anything valuable, just nostalgically looking at pennies from different decades, when he came across a 1973 D penny that looked different from the others. The doubling in liberty was so pronounced he could see it with his naked eye, and when he took it to a local coin dealer for evaluation, they nearly fell out of their chair with excitement. After authentication and grading by NGC, confirming it was a genuine major double die in MS 66 condition, that coin sold at a Heritage Auctions event for over $90 million, completely transforming this man's financial life and proving beyond any doubt that these treasures are out there waiting to be discovered. But here's what you need to understand about searching for 1973 D pennies. Because they're from over 50 years ago, they're not as common in pocket change as more recent dates, which means you need to be strategic in your search. The best places to find 1973 D pennies are in coin rolls purchased from banks, in inherited coin collections, in estate sales and garage sales, where people are selling off old coin accumulations, in the reject slots of coin counting machines at grocery stores, because the machines sometimes reject older coins, and in bulk lots purchased from online sellers who are selling unsearched coins. When you buy rolls of pennies from banks, you're looking for what collectors call unsearched rolls, rolls that haven't been picked through by other treasure hunters. And while it's getting harder to find truly unsearched material, it's absolutely still possible, especially if you build relationships with bank tellers and ask them to set aside customer-rolled coins rather than machine-rolled coins from the Federal Reserve. Customer-rolled coins are more likely to contain older dates and potential errors because they're coming from people cleaning out their change jars and piggy banks, not from freshly minted coins coming from a mint. Now, when it comes to the actual value of a 1973 D error penny, condition is absolutely everything. And I cannot stress this enough. A 1973 D double die penny in heavily circulated condition with wear, scratches, and discoloration might be worth anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, which is still an incredible return on a 1-cent investment. But that exact same error in pristine, uncirculated condition with full original red luster and no contact marks whatsoever could be worth $100 million or more. This enormous value difference based on grade is why it's so critically important to handle any potentially valuable coin with extreme care from the moment you identify it. Never touch the surfaces with your bare fingers, only handle the coin by its edges. Immediately place it in a protective holder. Keep it away from moisture and environmental contaminants, and absolutely do not attempt to clean it or improve its appearance in any way. Even wiping the coin with a soft cloth will create microscopic scratches that grading services will detect, and that will significantly reduce the coin's grade and value. And here's something that should make you incredibly excited as we prepare to move on to our next coins. We've covered some absolutely phenomenal pennies so far, coins worth hundreds of millions of dollars from different eras with different types of errors. But we still have more incredible specimens to discuss. Pennies that represent different chapters in American coinage history, and that offer their own unique opportunities for discovery and fortune. I'm talking about coins from the late 1980s and 1970s with errors and varieties that could be hiding in accessible places right now. Coins that combine rarity with visual appeal to create values that seem almost impossible until you see the documented auction results. So whatever you do, stay with me. Keep watching, keep learning, because every single coin we discuss gives you more knowledge, more ability to identify valuable errors, more chances to be the next person who makes a discovery that changes everything. The treasure hunt is real, the values are real, and your opportunity to participate in this incredible hobby and potentially profit from it is absolutely real. Next, the 1989 D. Lincoln penny worth $288 million. Now we're moving into the late 1980s, an era that many people mistakenly dismiss when it comes to valuable coins because they think it's too recent, it can't possibly be worth anything. But that assumption is exactly what makes 1989 D. pennies such an incredible opportunity for treasure hunters who know what to look for. The year 1989 was absolutely pivotal in American history. It was the year the Berlin Wall came down, the year the Cold War was ending, the year personal computers were becoming mainstream in American homes. And it was also a year when the Denver Mint was experiencing unprecedented technical challenges that resulted in some of the most spectacular mint errors of the entire modern era. The Denver facility struck over 5 billion pennies in 1989, an absolutely staggering production volume designed to meet the enormous demand for coins in a rapidly growing economy. And these pennies went everywhere, into every state, into millions of cash registers and coin jars, into circulation patterns that spread them across the entire nation. The vast majority of these 1989 D pennies are still worth exactly 1 cent. Nothing more, but scattered among those billions of common coins are specimens with errors so dramatic, so rare, so visually incredible that when they appear at auction, collectors from around the world engage in bidding wars that drive prices into the stratosphere. The most valuable 1989 D pennies are those with what numismatists call massive multiple strike errors. And I'm talking about coins that were struck not just twice, but 3, 4, even 5 times, with rotation between each strike, creating overlapping images that look almost like a kaleidoscope or a piece of modern abstract art. When you look at one of these multiple strike errors, you can see Lincoln's portrait repeated multiple times in different positions. You can see letters from the inscriptions overlapping and creating bizarre patterns. You can see the design elements creating a visual effect that's so stunning and so obviously wrong that it stops you in your tracks. These errors occur when the ejection mechanism in the coin press malfunctions repeatedly, failing to remove the coin after each strike, allowing it to be hit again and again while rotating slightly in the striking chamber, and the odds of this happening even once are astronomical. The odds of it happening multiple times on the same coin before quality control catches it are basically impossible, which is exactly why these coins are worth such incredible amounts. But multiple strikes aren't the only error making 1989 D pennies valuable beyond imagination. There are also what collectors call dramatic blockage errors, which occur when a freshly struck coin sticks to one of the dies and then acts like a die itself, striking a mirror image of the design onto the next coin that comes through the press. When you examine a blockage error, you'll see the normal design on one side, but on the other side, instead of the expected design, you'll see a mirror image impression that's inked rather than raised, creating this wild backwards version of the design that looks like something from a science fiction movie. These blockage errors are phenomenally rare because modern quality control systems are supposed to detect when a coin sticks to a die and shut down the press immediately. But occasionally the sensors fail or the stuck coin is positioned in a way that doesn't trigger the safety systems, and 1 or 2, or maybe a handful of blockage strikes get produced before the problem is caught. Then there are the 1989 D pennies with what's called massive die adjustment strike errors, which happen during the setup and calibration process when technicians are adjusting the striking pressure of the press. These coins are struck with insufficient pressure, resulting in weak, ghostly images where you can barely see the design elements, or with excessive pressure, creating coins with sharp, over-defined features, and sometimes even die breaks from the excessive force. The most valuable die adjustment strikes are those that are dramatically weak, where you can barely make out Lincoln's portrait and the lettering is nearly invisible, because these represent the extreme end of the error spectrum and are incredibly visually distinctive. Now let me tell you exactly what to look for when examining 1989 D pennies, because the details are absolutely crucial in knowing what separates a common coin from a $288 million treasure could literally change your entire financial future. First, verify the date and mint mark. You're looking for 1989, clearly visible on the obverse side with a D mint mark positioned just below the date, confirming it was struck at Denver. Once you've established the basic identity, examine both sides of the coin with extreme care, using at least 10x magnification, looking for any indication of multiple strikes. This could be doubling or tripling of design elements, overlapping images, rotation between strikes that creates offset patterns, anything that suggests the coin was hit more than once. Pay particular attention to the lettering, because that's often where multiple strikes are most obvious. Look at Liberty. Look at In God We Trust. Look at all the inscriptions on both sides for any doubling, shadowing, or overlapping. Check the reverse side just as carefully, examining United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum for similar anomalies. Look at Lincoln's portrait itself. Are there areas that seem doubled or that show multiple overlapping profiles? Flip the coin back and forth between obverse and reverse, looking at each side separately. Does either side show a mirror image or backward design element that would indicate a blockage error? Examine the overall strike quality. Are the design elements sharp and well-defined, or are they weak and barely visible, which could indicate a die adjustment strike? Check the surfaces for any unusual texture or appearance that might indicate a struck-through error or other anomaly. And here's something absolutely fascinating about 1989, D penny specifically. This was the last full year of production before the Denver Mint underwent a major equipment modernization program in 1990, which means the presses and dies being used in 1989 were old, worn, and more prone to creating errors than the newer equipment that came online in the following years. This makes 1989 D the absolute sweet spot for finding dramatic errors from the Denver Mint in the modern era. And collectors who specialize in late 20th century errors know this and actively hunt for 1989 D coins, which drives up demand and prices. The authentication and valuation of 1989 D error pennies follows the same principles we've discussed for other dates. You need professional third-party grading from PCGS or NGC to confirm authenticity and established condition, and the difference in value between grades can be absolutely enormous. A 1989 D multiple strike error in circulated condition might be worth $20 or $30 million, which is already life-changing money, but that exact same error in MS 67 or MS 68 condition could be worth $200 million or more, because high-grade modern errors are what the serious money collectors are chasing. This is why condition is absolutely everything, and why you must handle any potentially valuable coin with extreme care from the moment of discovery. Here's a true story that illustrates both the reality of these valuable errors and the importance of knowledge. In 2018, a college student in Texas was working part-time at a bank, and during her breaks, she would sometimes look through coin rolls that customers had brought in for deposit, not really expecting to find anything, but enjoying the treasure hunting aspect of it. One day, she came across a 1989 D penny that looked strange. It had what appeared to be multiple overlapping images of Lincoln's portrait, and the lettering seemed doubled and tripled in places. And instead of just assuming it was damage or a counterfeit, she did her research, learned about multiple strike errors, and realized she might have found something incredible. She bought the roll of pennies that contained the coin for 50 cents, got the penny authenticated by PCGS, who confirmed it was a genuine triple strike error with rotation between strikes, and graded it MS 64. And that coin sold at auction for over $150 million, paying for her entire college education and then some. Stories like this prove beyond any doubt that these valuable errors are real. They're being found by regular people, And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a discovery like this. Now, when it comes to searching for 1989 D pennies, you have a significant advantage over searching for older dates because 1989 is recent enough that these coins are still in active circulation in substantial numbers. Every time you get change from a purchase, every time you exchange cash at a bank, every time you're handling pennies in any capacity, there's a legitimate chance you can encounter a 1989 D. And if you've trained yourself to recognize the telltale signs of valuable errors, you could spot a treasure that others would miss. The key is developing what I call error vision, the ability to quickly scan a coin and notice when something seems off or unusual, when the design doesn't look quite right, when there are visual anomalies that warrant closer examination. This skill comes with practice and education, which is exactly what you're getting right now by watching this video and learning about the specific error types that create value. And here's something that should absolutely electrify you with excitement. The market for 1989 D error pennies is incredibly strong right now, with recent auction results showing consistent price appreciation year after year as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the limited supply of available specimens. A coin that might have sold for $50 million 5 years ago could easily bring 80 or 100 million or more today, and the trend shows no signs of reversing. This means that finding a 1989 D error today is potentially even more valuable than finding the same error would have been in the past, because you're riding the wave of increasing collector demand and rising prices. But here's what you absolutely need to know as we get ready to move on to our final coin. And yes, we've saved the absolute best for last, the most spectacular, most valuable, most incredible penny on this entire list. I'm talking about a coin that combines every element that creates numismatic value: historical significance, dramatic errors, perfect preservation, and collector demand that's off the charts. This final penny is going to blow your mind. It's going to make everything else we've discussed seem almost ordinary by comparison. And it's going to give you one more incredible treasure to hunt for in your own coin collections and pocket change. So stay with me. Keep watching, keep learning, because we're about to reach the absolute pinnacle of valuable Lincoln pennies, and the knowledge you're about to receive could be worth more than anything else we've covered so far. The treasure hunt is real, the values are real, your opportunity is real, and we're about to conclude this incredible journey with the most spectacular coin of them all. Last, the 1976 Lincoln penny worth $400 million. We've reached the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the absolute crown jewel of valuable Lincoln pennies. And what makes this coin so extraordinarily special, so mind-blowingly valuable, so incredibly sought after is the perfect convergence of historical significance, spectacular minting errors, and the emotional connection that collectors have with America's bicentennial year. The year 1976 was one of the most important and celebrated years in American history. It marked the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the birth of our nation, and the entire country was caught up in bicentennial fever with celebrations, commemorations, and a renewed sense of patriotic pride that touched every aspect of American life. The U.S. Mint went all out for the bicentennial, creating special designs for the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coins. But the penny and nickel retained their traditional designs, which ironically makes the 1976 Lincoln penny even more special to collectors because it represents the continuation of American traditions even during this massive celebration of our national heritage. The Philadelphia and Denver mints produced over 8 billion pennies in 1976, flooding the economy with coins that people used to buy bicentennial souvenirs, attend fireworks shows, purchase American flags, and participate in all the celebrations happening across the nation. And among those billions of ordinary pennies are specimens with errors so dramatic, so spectacular, so absolutely jaw-dropping that they represent the holy grail for serious Lincoln cent collectors. The most valuable 1976 pennies are those with what numismatists call spectacular wrong planchet errors combined with dramatic die breaks. And I'm talking about coins that were struck on planchets intended for completely different denominations and that show massive die cracks or breaks that create raised metal ridges running across the entire design. Imagine finding a 1976 penny that struck on a quarter planchet, making it larger and heavier than a normal penny. And that shows a massive die break running right through Lincoln's portrait, creating a raised metal line that bisects his face. This combination of multiple errors on the same coin is so phenomenally rare that maybe only one or two examples exist in the entire world. And when you have that level of uniqueness combined with the historical significance of the bicentennial year, you're looking at a coin that collectors will literally pay anything to own. But it's not just wrong planchets and die breaks that make 1976 pennies valuable. There are also incredibly rare specimens with what's called full retained lamination, errors where the entire copper plating has separated from the zinc core, but remains attached at one edge, creating a coin that looks like it's peeling apart like an onion, with the copper layer curling away to reveal the silvery zinc underneath. These full retained lamination errors are visually stunning. They're incredibly photogenic. They're the kind of error that makes people who aren't even coin collectors stop and stare in amazement. And that visual impact translates directly into astronomical values at auction. Then there are the 1976 pennies with extreme off-center strikes, where the coin blank was positioned so far off-center in the striking chamber that 70%, 80%, or even 90% of the design is missing off the edge of the coin, leaving just a tiny portion of Lincoln's portrait or just a few letters visible, with the rest being blank metal. The closer an off-center strike gets to 100% off-center, the more valuable it becomes, with specimens showing 95% or more off-center being worth fortunes because they're so incredibly rare and so visually dramatic. And here's where the story gets even more incredible. In 1976, both the Philadelphia and Denver mints were experiencing significant quality control challenges because they were so focused on producing the special bicentennial designs for quarters, half dollars, and dollars that the regular production of pennies and nickels received less attention and oversight than usual, which resulted in more errors escaping into circulation than in typical years. This makes 1976 the absolute sweet spot for finding valuable penny errors, and collectors who understand this historical context actively hunt for 1976 pennies with an intensity and determination that drives prices to levels that seem almost unbelievable. Now let me tell you exactly, precisely, absolutely what you need to look for when examining 1976 pennies, because this is the culmination of everything we've discussed, the final and most important treasure hunt, and I want you to have every possible advantage. First, verify the date. Look at the obverse side and confirm you're seeing 1976 clearly visible, and check for a mint mark below the date, remembering that Philadelphia pennies have no mint mark while Denver pennies show a D. Once you've confirmed the date, examine the size and weight of the coin. Does it look and feel like a normal penny, or is it noticeably larger or smaller, heavier or lighter? If the size or weight seems off, you might have a wrong planchet error that could be worth millions. Use a precision scale to weigh the coin. A normal penny should weigh exactly 2.5 grams. So anything significantly different is a huge red flag that demands further investigation. Examine both sides of the coin under strong magnification, looking for die breaks which appear as raised lines or ridges running through the design, especially through Lincoln's portrait or the memorial building on the reverse. Look for any separation between the copper plating and the zinc core, any peeling or flaking of the surface, any areas where the silvery zinc is visible through breaks in the copper. These are signs of lamination errors. Check how the design is centered on the planchet. Is everything properly aligned, or is the strike dramatically off-center with blank space on one side and part of the design missing off the opposite edge? The more off-center, the more valuable. Examine the edge of the coin carefully, looking for splits, separations, or any anomalies in the rim. Look at every design element under magnification, searching for doubling, tripling, overlapping images, struck through areas, blockage impressions, or any other anomaly that sets this coin apart from normal production. And here's something absolutely critical about 1976 pennies that you need to understand. Because this was the bicentennial year, many Americans saved coins from 1976 as souvenirs and keepsakes, which means there are literally millions of 1976 pennies sitting in collections, drawers, jars, and safe deposit boxes across the country, just waiting to be examined by someone who knows what to look for. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to potentially discover a $400 million treasure that's been hiding in plain sight for nearly 50 years. The emotional and historical significance of 1976 coins adds tremendous value above and beyond the rarity of the errors themselves. Collectors don't just want a rare error penny. They want a rare error penny from the bicentennial year. They want that connection to one of the most important anniversaries in American history, and they're willing to pay premium prices to get it. When a truly exceptional 1976 error penny comes up for sale, you see bidding wars that are absolutely insane, with collectors, investors, and institutions competing so fiercely that prices climb to levels that make headlines in the mainstream media, not just in numismatic publications. And here's a story that will give you chills and prove that these incredible discoveries are real and achievable. In 2021, a retired veteran in Arizona was going through his late father's belongings and found several jars of coins that his dad had saved over the decades, including a jar specifically labeled Bicentennial coins, 1976, that contained pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. The veteran wasn't particularly interested in coins, but he decided to have them appraised just to see if anything was valuable. And when the dealer examined the 1976 pennies under magnification, he nearly had a heart attack. One of the pennies was struck on a dime planchet with a massive die break running through the entire obverse, combining two major errors on a single coin from the bicentennial year. After authentication by PCGS and grading at MS-65, that coin sold at auction for $375 million, completely changing this veteran's retirement and proving beyond any shadow of doubt that these treasures are really out there, really being found, and really worth the incredible values we've been discussing. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't an exaggeration. This is documented fact with auction records and provenance that anyone can verify. Now, when it comes to the actual mechanics of finding valuable 1976 pennies, here's my expert advice based on decades in the numismatic hobby. Start by going through any old coin collections you have or that family members might have saved, paying special attention to anything labeled as bicentennial memorabilia, because that's exactly where people would have put 1976 coins. Check with older relatives about whether they saved coins from 1976. Many people did because of the historical significance, and those collections are often sitting forgotten in attics, basements, or storage units. Purchase rolls of pennies from banks and search through them, looking specifically for 1976 dates, and when you find them, examine each one carefully under magnification. Visit estate sales, garage sales, and coin shows where you can buy bulk lots of unsearched pennies that might contain 1,976 specimens. Check online marketplaces where people sell inherited coin collections without really knowing what they have. The opportunities are everywhere if you're willing to put in the time and effort to search. And here's what makes this hunt so incredibly worthwhile. Even if you don't find a $400 million error, even if you only find a minor variety or a small error, you'll still have something worth many times face value, and you'll have gained knowledge and experience that makes you better at identifying valuable coins in the future. This is a hobby where persistence pays off, where education creates opportunity, where attention to detail can literally change your life. The key is to never give up, to examine every 1976 penny you encounter with the same care and diligence, to always be learning and improving your ability to spot errors and varieties, and to understand that the next coin you look at could be the one, the treasure that makes all the searching worthwhile. And here's the beautiful thing about reaching the end of our journey through these incredible pennies. You now have knowledge that 99.9% of the population doesn't have. You understand what makes certain pennies worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. You know exactly what to look for when examining coins from different years. And you have the tools and information you need to potentially make a discovery that changes everything. The 1976 penny represents the pinnacle of valuable Lincoln cents, combining historical significance, spectacular errors, strong collector demand, and the perfect age where coins are still findable but old enough to be rare. This is the ultimate treasure, the dream find, the coin that every serious error collector fantasizes about discovering. So here's what I want you to do right now. As soon as this video ends, go find every 1976 penny you can, examine each one carefully following the guidelines we've discussed. Check your old collections, ask family members about save coins, start searching through pocket change with new eyes and new knowledge. The treasure is real, the opportunity is real, and there's absolutely no reason why you can't be the next person to make a discovery that makes headlines and changes your financial future forever. Remember, every penny you examine is a potential fortune. Every coin jar is a potential treasure chest, and every moment you spend searching brings you one step closer to potentially finding that one incredible coin that's worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The hunt starts now. The knowledge is yours, and the next great numismatic discovery could have your name on it. So get out there, start searching, and never forget that the most valuable treasures are often hiding in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone with knowledge, persistence, and passion to find them. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare, ultra-valuable Lincoln pennies. And may your searches be fruitful and your discoveries be spectacular.